I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
What about the whole idea of experimentation? Your life is an experiment on doing experiments. For your book, Drop Dead Healthy, how did you reduce stress to become healthier?
There's some interesting data on human touch, that touching other human beings reduces stress. If you hold your mate's, your spouse's hand, that really reduces it. But even if you hold a stranger's hand, then it lowers your stress level. To me, that it would probably go the opposite. I would find it very stressful to
hold your mate's hand?
That I can do.
Now that we've settled down on Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump as the two presidential candidates, you figured out that they were related.
That is true, yes. They are, what was it? They're like 8th cousins 3 times removed. They're not so far off. And it's fun because you can see how you're related to pretty much anyone in the world. So for instance, Barack Obama is my 5th great aunt's husband's brother's wife's 7th great nephew. So I feel close to him. I feel like he's my brother.
Oh my God, I'm so happy, AJ. Finally, we're doing a podcast together face to face. We're in studio. AJ Jacobs.
It is great to be here and see your punam, your lovely punam.
Well, and by the way, you're my cousin. So as we figured out when you had the world's largest family reunion, the record-breaking world's largest family reunion last year.
That's right. I invited 7 billion cousins. Did not get...
No, but we're like third cousins.
Yeah, we are very close. We did the DNA test, and
yes.
we are, we are just 2 Jewish peas in a pod.
Well, let me get over the intro with you because you're so fascinating. You've written 4 New York Times bestsellers, and I always forget the titles, but this time I'm going to get them right. One is The Year of Living Biblically, where you spent an entire year living according to the rules of the Bible. The next one is The Know-It-All. I'm not going to do it in chronological order. The next one I'm saying is The Know-It-All, where you read the Britannica from A to Z.
Right.
And the one after that is Drop Dead Healthy, where you got in shape.
Very impressive. You're 3 for 4.
My Life as an Experiment.
Wow.
4 for 4.
Nailed
How many
them.
people get that right when they interview you?
0.
Really?
0. I'm just happy if anyone, pronounces my name correctly instead of Al Jacobs.
Well, I kind of think, all the books are fun. All the books, I'll summarize them in a kind of try to generalize them. They're all an experiment that you did over a course of time, like let's say a year, like The Year of Living Biblically, and then you kind of recorded the results on yourself. It's almost like you're a scientist on yourself.
Right, exactly. A human guinea pig.
Yeah, human guinea pig. And I want to kind of get into the aspects of what it means to experiment on yourself and how people could benefit by doing experiments on themselves. And we've talked about this a little before in another podcast, but I want to go more in depth. And but one thing I read recently that you wrote that I wanted to kind of narrow it in on, and this just has nothing to do with any of your books. You wrote recently, now that we've settled down on Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump as the two presidential candidates, you figured out that they were related.
That is true. Yes, they are. What was it? They're like eighth cousins, 3 times removed. They're not so far off. So they share. So maybe.
Do you think that will make the political debates a little more kind?
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping, they'll hug it out and say, you know what, we're all one big family. Not sure that's going to happen, but it's.
Who do you think will win?
Well, I think it'll be Hillary. I hope so. I actually just did, I don't know if you want to get into the politics, but
Why not?
I did a Facebook post the other day because, you know how Donald Trump, in my opinion, he's not obsessed with factual accuracy, right?
But what politician is?
Well, that's true. But he seems a little more to the liberal side of telling the truth than others. But, and it reminded me, I call it the tiny Clooney effect.
Okay.
And this is because 5 years ago, I interviewed George Clooney. And he told me a story about Donald Trump, how George Clooney was watching Larry King on CNN one day. And Trump started talking about Clooney and said, that George Clooney, I don't want to knock him, but he's a tiny guy. He's just a little small man. He's like, and Clooney's like, I met the guy in person once. I met Trump once in person. I was sitting down at a table. So I guess sitting at the table, I looked about 3'5". And maybe that's where you got the idea that I was tiny. And to me, that's symptomatic of Trump's views on a lot of issues on the economy.
Maybe George Clooney has really long legs and a small torso, so he looks smaller than other people sitting down.
That's a generous interpretation. I like that.
Just trying to figure it out. Now, so the world's largest family reunion, how many people came to it? You broke some records because I think you had family reunions happening around the world at the same time.
That's right. We had 40 family reunions all around the world.
And how many people were attending all together? Or how many cousins were attending all together?
All together, we had about 14,000 cousins. We had 4,000 in New York and about 10,000 around the world. So we had them in New Zealand and Mexico and Colombia, all over. So it was, and we had Sister Sledge singing "We Are Family."
I know. I was standing right behind I don't want to say the main sister, the first sister, the oldest sister.
They're all equal
I was
sisters.
right there. She even looked back at me. I took a photo. Bam.
Nice. Yeah, I remember your voice. You were...
I was singing above... My voice was rising like a goddess above the crowd.
Totally. You were harmonizing like a madman.
So why are you doing this? So obviously you're doing this because you're writing a book about how all this stuff about genealogy. What are some of the things you've learned?
Well, that's what's happening in genealogy is fascinating. I always thought it was, for blue-haired 75-year-old ladies. Nothing against them, but it's actually going through this fascinating revolution because you've got DNA testing, so you can spit into a little tube and they'll send you back hundreds of cousins, like you and
I figured out,
right?
And we never were able to actually connect up our family tree, right?
No, but I'm working on it.
Okay.
I will have it.
All right.
So that's one part of the revolution. But the other part is that there are these websites that are like crowdsourced, collaborative websites where you have thousands of people working on the same big family tree. So I'm on one that has literally over 100 million people. So
connect it up. Well, how do people find that one?
That's called Genie.com. Also, it's on Wikitree.com is another competing website. And it's fun because you can see how you're related to pretty much anyone in the world. So, for instance, Barack Obama is my 5th great aunt's husband's brother's wife's 7th great nephew. So I feel close to him. I feel like he's my brother.
So, and there is, I remember you were talking, there is one president who's not related to any other president. There's only one, though.
Oh, yeah. I think it's Martin Van Buren, right? Yeah, he is.
Why wouldn't he be related? Oh, because he's Dutch, and somehow they became more insulated.
Right. But he is still related. It's just a little farther out. Also, the only president whose English was not his first language.
Okay.
I sounded like English was not my first language when I said that sentence.
What are some other fun genealogy facts?
Well, I do love...
what's the average? Like, if you're an Ashkenazi Jew,
right?
What cousins are you from other Ashkenazi Jews?
You are, on average, just 5 cousins away. You share enough DNA that you're considered 5th cousins.
Is it possible that you're not related at all?
No, that's impossible if you're two Jews.
What about if you're two people from, well, let's say you're two African Americans. What's the furthest away you are?
Well, in terms of everyone, like taking two random people, someone from Borneo and someone from Brazil, an MIT scientist calculated the farthest would be a 70th cousin. So that's the farthest by blood you have on Earth, which is, to me, it's remarkable. And I love that.
To be a 70th cousin, how many hundreds of years do you have to go back to find the common ancestor?
Well, it's 71 generations, so it depends on about 25 generations.
So maybe like
25
15,
years.
1600 years?
Yeah.
1800 years?
Is that right? You're the math guy.
No, I'm making it up.
You are. I should know. I can take about 30 seconds to figure it out.
So since Jesus, you had a common ancestor?
Maybe. I think it goes back a little farther than that. But certainly it is not as far as you would think. Partly because of interbreeding. You know, these in the world now with jet travel, we are just breaking down the walls.
Well, and how many people have you called up and said, "Hey, I'm your," like who are the most interesting people you've called up and said, "Hey, I'm your cousin, can I interview you?" And they've said yes because such a fascinating thing.
That's it.
You called them up and said that you were related to them.
It is the ultimate social network. It's like LinkedIn on steroids. Because, for instance, I wanted to interview George H.W. Bush about presidential family. So I called his chief of staff and I said, "Can I interview the president?" And she said, "Well, he doesn't do interviews anymore." And I said, "But I am his cousin." And she's like, "Oh, all right. In that case, let me see what I can do." And I got an interview with him.
Did you fly down there?
Yeah, I flew down to Houston. And it was a lovely time.
What was it like? He was sitting in a room and they walked you in and he was like friendly and...
Yes. I had... He is he's got a office in Houston. I actually interviewed him many years before when he was doing more interviews. And I found him to be delightful. I'm a liberal Democrat because I live in New York, and that's like the law. But he is, as far as Republicans go, extremely moderate. Now he looks like a socialist.
Yeah.
But he, one of my favorite moments was. I asked him what his favorite bathroom was in the White House, because I imagine they have a lot of bathrooms. And he said he loved the bathroom in the Queen's room, the Queen's bedroom, which is made of wicker. It's, I guess, outside wicker. And he loved going in there and sitting there and thinking of all of the great people who had sat on that toilet before him. And he said, for instance, Barbara Streisand. And I'm like, what? Why would you go to Barbara Streisand? It's just a weird choice. But I love that he's so human, that he's happy to talk about that. You know, presidents have to have bowel movements just like all of us.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that?
What other cousins have you interviewed?
Well, I got to meet, the Sports Illustrated model, Chrissy Teigen.
I remember when you interviewed her, you called me up immediately afterwards, but go ahead.
Yeah, I felt it was important to make contact with my family. So I got her, and I interviewed her. One of the best top 3 moments of my life, actually, was with Chrissy Teigen. It was, I would say,
what happened?
This was in no order. It's my wedding, my kids being born, and then the because we were talking about religion for some reason, and out of the blue, she said, "Did you ever read a book called The Year of Living Biblically?" And I said, "I have read that book many times because I wrote it." And she was just like, "What?" And I don't think she was acting. I genuinely don't. She's so that was, to me, it was like, I will live on that moment.
That's so
forever.
funny. So let me ask you about that book for a second. So you basically lived for a year according to the rules of the Bible, and on the cover there's you with a sheep and a beard and a staff and a robe. And for me, I can't imagine spending a year doing something and then writing the book. Like, you really, when you commit to writing a book, that's a commitment. Like, you're going to basically say, I'm taking a year off of my life, I'm doing this, and then I'm going to spend another year writing about it, and then another year waiting for it to come out. Like, this is like a big commitment, a book like that, which of course is probably why when you make a commitment like that, it's why it becomes a bestseller, because you're putting so much of mental effort into it. But why do you do this? Why did you do something like that?
Well, I do. You're right. It takes over my life, and it's almost like taking apart, being a method actor, a method writer, and I get that one I did because I was just fascinated by religion. I grew up with no religion at all. As I said to you before in the book, I say I'm Jewish, but I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian, so not very. But I thought one of the best ways to learn about any topic is to try it out, to live it, to experience it, and that's what I do. And as we were talking about before, I think it's a great way to live, even if you're not writing a book, even if you're just trying to make your life better. Experiment, see what works and see what doesn't. And you don't have to wear a robe and grow a big beard. You can do smaller experiments.
Like what?
Well, one of the things I did for the year of living biblically was I stopped gossiping attempted to. It's impossible to stop. But I'd say I cut down 40%. And it really improved my life in weird ways, unexpected ways.
Like what? Like how? And by the way, so define gossip. So you didn't talk about anybody behind their back. You didn't talk about celebrities. What?
That's it. Both of those. I try not to.
We just talked about George Clooney, for instance. Is that gossiping?
No, because I think he was.
We were reporting facts.
Well, gossip can be facts, but I think it's negative facts. Talking negatively about someone. If you have something negative to say, it's better to say it to their face. There are exceptions, but one of my favorite parts of that year was there's a 1-800 number that Orthodox Jews have. It's like a gossip hotline. It's like a suicide hotline, but for gossip. So if you have the urge to gossip, you could call this hotline and then spill the beans, and you don't have.
How many people call that number a year?
I don't know. I called it and found it very helpful. But overall, what happens is when you stop talking so negatively about people, it changes the way you think. Because I think my brain is lazy, and it's if it realizes it's not going to get this negative talk out there, then why even generate these thoughts? And so the behavior really affects the thoughts.
I understand it changes your brain like in a plasticity kind of way.
Yeah, it changed the way I thought. I don't know about brain, but it certainly changed the way I thought, and I started thinking more positively about people. So
you know what? I want to write this down. Jay, who's our editor, Jay, can I get like a pen and paper somehow?
Oh, I have one right. What about this?
Can I use yours?
Well, yeah, why not? I got nothing on it.
So wait. All right. So it changes your brain because it makes you start thinking more positively. Because why? As soon as do you become aware of thinking negatively as soon as the negative thoughts come in your head?
That's part of it.
It's like almost like this Zen thing of becoming more aware of your thoughts.
Right. And that's very much. I love the whole metacognition and thinking about thinking. And also, it's just if you're going to talk, you have to find something positive to say about someone, and that's a challenge because positive talk can be boring. The negative talk is often more fun. So it's a good challenge.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think negative talk is more fun?
Probably evolutionary reasons, it's.
Like it's more important to know who could slow you down in the jungle or kill you than who is going to, I don't know, help you or
maybe
what do you
something
think?
like that.
I don't know. I always try to think of what the evolutionary reason is, but it sounds like it can go either way here.
Yeah, that is interesting. I guess it's if someone in the tribe was like stealing caribou meat and
what's a caribou?
What, a reindeer? I think it's related to reindeer. So, yeah.
Did you get that from the know-it-all, from reading the Encyclopedia Britannica A to Z?
Maybe I did, yeah. And I could be totally making it up. But that, I'm pretty sure, is what it is.
So no gossip. What else did you learn from the year of living biblically? Which, by the way, I think I slurred that word too, biblically. Biblically.
It's a hard word.
Biblically.
Yeah, I understand. Well, one thing overall was the idea of gratitude. That was a big one because the Bible says that you should say thanks all the time. It's right in there. And so I took that very literally, and I would say thanks for every part of my life. So I took it literally. I would press the elevator button, and I'd be thankful the elevator came to the first floor, and then I'd get into the elevator, and I'd be thankful it didn't plummet to the basement and break my collarbone. And it was a very bizarre way to live, but it was also wonderful because you realize there are hundreds of things that go right every day that we totally take for granted, and we focus on the 3 or 4 that go wrong. So it's a radical shift in perspective that I've tried to keep. I can't always do it, but I try.
And how do you think it's helped your life?
Tremendously. It's made, instead of focusing and being depressed about the 3 negative things that went wrong, I'm able to, when I'm online at the pharmacy and it's taken 14 minutes, I try to remember all the times I was online at the pharmacy and there was no one online, and I went right to or I try to think of the fact that if I lived in 1853, it would take me all day to go to the pharmacy, and I'd probably get some horrible potion that killed me. You know, so try, and that was another. This is unrelated, semi-related to the Bible, but in general, I am so thankful that I live in today, in modern times, as opposed to 100 years ago, 200 years ago, because the good old days were not good. The good old days sucked.
Like, do you ever read that article, or maybe you even wrote that, or maybe I'm going to be like Chrissy Teigen, or maybe I'm going to mention an article you actually wrote.
That would be
Although
nice.
in other ways, I'm not like Chrissy Teigen, so it'll never actually be the biggest moment of your life. But did you ever read that article, a description of family life in like 1810? And it's just actually awful. Like, everyone has lice, you can't, there's nothing you can really cook, and the sleeping is miserable, and you're freezing all the time.
That's it. Well, I don't know if I write a column every month for Mental Floss magazine, which is a lovely magazine all about like facts and trivia, basically with the theme that life used to suck. And I go through every different aspect of life. So it could be sleep, like sleeping on hay and lice, or it could be medicine, where you go to the doctor and they give you a smoke enema. That was a very popular cure for all sorts of things. And it's basically, the phrase blowing smoke up your ass.
I do know that phrase.
I am glad. Well, this is the origin. This is the literal origin. They believe.
Wait, so why is that? So they use that as an enema. Why is that related to lying, though? So blowing smoke up your ass means you're lying.
Lying.
Or you're being lied to. Oh, he's blowing smoke up your ass. Doesn't that mean lying?
Oh, right. Oh, I always thought that it was like just puffing someone up. But maybe,
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, you might be right. I could be wrong.
Well, we'll let people.
Does it work? Does a smoke enema work? I would think it works. Doesn't smoking a cigarette kind of expel everything out of your body?
So you're coming out pro-cigarette? Good.
Well, I'm wondering if a smoke enema actually does the same thing a cigarette might do.
I will say, I'm sure it gave them
every morning my mom used to drink prune juice and smoke cigarettes, and that was her breakfast, and then she'd run back and forth to the bathroom.
Interesting. Yes, absolutely. I'm sure it cured constipation, and I'm sure that it gave you a head rush. But it's not going to, it's not going to cure the flu.
Which reminds me actually of an experiment you just concluded, because when we ran into each other a few weeks ago at a reading by Charles Duhigg, who's been on this podcast for the book Better, Faster, Smarter, and you were chewing tobacco.
Yes, I work at Esquire magazine, and I was assigned an article. The new editor-in-chief is a Southerner, and he was shocked and appalled that me, as a Northerner, had never tried chewing tobacco, dipping tobacco. So I tried it for a month, and it was fascinating. 10 million people in America use dipping tobacco, so it's a pretty.
What's the difference between dipping tobacco and chewing tobacco?
Well, they're all called smokeless tobacco, but chewing is like the big leaves, and you just shove them in your cheek, and dipping is a little more processed, so they chop it up, and you put it in your under your lip. All these things I learned, all this important information. But I will say, it was fascinating to read the history of chewing tobacco. That was my favorite part, because it was huge. In the 1800s, everyone did it. There were spittoons everywhere in the in the Senate. If you were in a jury, there was a spittoon. You go to the bathroom, you go to the theater. Like everyone was just shoving tobacco in their face.
And did they all get like jaw cancer or lip cancer? Like
The ones who lived long enough may well have, but I'm sure they were killed by other things too.
So what did you learn? Like, what's the benefit of chewing tobacco, if there's any?
Well, I did. I mean, just being honest, I loved the head rush. I had never smoked. So nicotine is a very addictive drug for a reason. It gives you an awesome head rush. And it was like Adderall. It made me so efficient. I was like, because I would put it in and then I would work and I would bang out 50 emails in 10 minutes.
And would you have trouble sleeping afterwards?
Yeah, if you did it too late at night, definitely. But I did not come out as an advocate of dipping because I think the cons outweigh the pros.
Is there any way to safely take nicotine to get those benefits?
There are studies that nicotine itself is bad for your cardiovascular system. So any way you take it, it's probably bad for you. But there are people who argue that these little these snooze, they're called, they're little packets of tobacco that you put in your lip, that those are slightly more healthy, but I can't really attest to that.
So you did it. You did this experiment that was actually potentially detrimental to your health, but it's the idea of experimenting that is really interesting to me. Like you experiment all the time. Like that's why even smaller experiments that you've done, you collected into the book My Life as an Experiment.
Right.
And we've discussed it before, like kind of one was you outsourced your entire life, including arguments with your wife to a firm in India.
That's right. I love that one.
And then another where you did an experiment where to see what your sexual and romantic attraction was to your wife.
Right.
Your poor wife, how does she put up with all this stuff?
Well, she's very patient and she has veto power. So there are people, I've gotten a lot of suggestions. So for instance, people say, oh, you should do one where you try to become the greatest lover in the world and do all the positions in the Kama Sutra. And
she rejected that.
She was like, no way, that is exhausting. She's like, I'm too old for that. And I agree. I mean, I don't have the flexibility anymore to pull that
anymore.
off.
You had it at one point and you're like, that was your window of trying every position in the Kama Sutra. And now you just don't have that flexibility.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I think I should take out the anymore. But yeah, no, and I think she realizes in the end, after all the pain and irritation, that I do take away the good stuff and leave the bad stuff. So like the Bible, I think made me a slightly better person. I'm not saying I'm...
What about Drop Dead Healthy? What did you take away from that you still do?
Oh, quite a bit.
And that was a year of getting in shape? Or how long did that take?
2 years it took me. 2 years.
And it took 2 years for you to get in shape. You were that out of shape.
I was really a fixer-upper. Absolutely.
Did you get like muscle or you were just trying to trim down?
I tried to get muscle. That didn't work out as well. And I got some, but I never looked like
me.
Like you. That's exactly who I was thinking of.
So what's your takeaway that you still do from Drop Dead Healthy?
The takeaways are, one, I really am a convert to the whole idea of movement and moving. So I actually work on a treadmill. So
every day?
Every day.
So a treadmill desk?
A treadmill desk.
How fast is it going?
Well, it depends. Usually about 1 mile an hour. But
it doesn't distract you from like the work, like because you're moving your legs?
No, in fact, I think it helps. That's just me personally, because if I'm sitting and I'm trying to write, I often fall asleep. My head just goes onto my forehead hits the keyboard.
Really?
And now, when you're on a treadmill, you can't do that, or else you're gonna get a broken leg. So I loved that. I actually did. There's a movement I explored where they're very passionate about chewing your food. It's that they call it Chewdyism is the name of it. So
are there Orthodox chews?
There are definite Orthodox chews. I mean, the real hardcore people are insane. They say chew 100 times per mouthful, which if you try to do that it takes all day to eat it like a tuna salad. So
I could see that like being again, back 70,000 years ago before we had fire, say chewing raw foods was probably very important. How important is it now? To some extent, we've outsourced chewing to fire.
Right, that's true.
So how important is it now, really? And so anyway, describe what Judaism is, so I understand first. But then I'll ask my question.
Basically it's self-explanatory. You chew your food more than you normally would. So I can't do 100, but I do 20, 15 or 20 chews per mouthful. Because if you pay attention to what most people do, they just wolf it down in 3 chews per mouthful.
Let's say a bite of steak. How much would you chew that?
Yeah, 15 maybe.
15, okay. Whereas I would think to myself, probably 4 or 5.
Yeah, exactly. We're wolfer downers.
And have you noticed a difference in health, in your metabolism from that?
Well, what it does is it slows down your eating, which I think is important because the slower you eat, the less you eat. Because as you probably know, our bodies are insane, and it takes 20 minutes for the stomach to send the signal to the brain that it's full. So if you're eating really quickly, you're going to overstuff yourself. So this is just, there are people who argue you get more protein, blah, and there are some studies on that. But to me, it's more important the idea of just...
Why do you get more protein?
Well, you break it down, break the food down. There was a study on almonds, and if you chew them, you get more protein. But to me, that's secondary. The real benefit is just slowing down your eating so you eat less.
I would imagine digestion would be better also, just because now you're digesting smaller pieces of food.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, why not? I mean, that was another big takeaway is that I am very skeptical now of health gurus because you can find a study to support anything. If you want a study that says, eating bacon 3 times a day is the path to immortality, you can find a study for that.
Oh my God, can you please find me that study?
I will
then
find
I will definitely eat bacon 3 times a day. I'll say that study told me to. I just ate, where was I? I was at a restaurant and it was this beautiful thick cut bacon, and you could the kind you could use a knife and fork on. And it had fat running through it, and I just I felt that feeling when you fall in love in junior high school. I felt that feeling.
Well,
so I
it's
really want that
fat, salt, and sugar.
But do you think being skeptical about health gurus, does that help you? I mean, obviously it helps you. So if anybody says you should do this, you could say no.
Right.
But in what positive way does it help you?
It helps me in that I'm not skeptical of science. I think science is the best we have. It's hugely flawed, it's biased, it's corrupt, but it's the best we have. But don't just take one scientist's word for it, because you can find Harvard-respected scientists who deny climate change and whatever. So look at what everyone is saying. I think of it as like Rotten Tomatoes. I don't just trust one critic. I look on Rotten Tomatoes and see what are the bulk of critics saying. And that's what I do with science. And
okay, so what an example is diets. What kind of, after all 2 years of drop dead healthy, what's a basic diet that you think is reasonable?
I think to me the most important is avoiding highly processed sugars. So I am a fan of the Michael Pollan. Do you know that food writer who says he boils it down to 6 or 8 words, which is eat food, like real food, not processed food, not too much. So watch your quantity, and now I forgot that they're only 6 words and I can't remember them. Eat food, not too much, and mostly plants. So he is on the mostly plant side. And I am too, overall. If you look at all of the science, it does seem to indicate that mostly plants is a little better. Yeah, paleo people will disagree with that. But I think, again, with paleo, you can find wonderful, brilliant scientists who support it. But look at the big spread of scientists, and I got to go with the majority.
Here's always a big question that is fruits. Because some people say, oh, fruits ultimately are sugar. Other people say fruits are good sugars, or there's some other thing around the sugars in fruits that makes it easier to digest and pass through you.
Right.
What's the story on fruit?
Well, I'm in that latter category. I mean, they do have sugar. The sugars within fruits are poison, but there's enough good stuff surrounding the poison that they're okay to eat. And overall, I think vegetables are, people always lump fruits and vegetables together. I think vegetables are a lot better than fruits. But listen, if you're going to eat fruits, that's not terrible. That's not bad. That's not like, that's not like drinking Diet Coke, which I'm doing right now, which is, I'm totally hypocritical.
Why do you drink Diet Coke?
For the
diet?
caffeine. No, it's totally not good for your diet. I mean, the studies show that you gain as much weight from Diet Coke as regular Coke. And part of the theory is that it fools your taste buds. And once the sugar, the sweetness hits your taste buds, it doesn't matter whether it's real sugar or fake sugar, it sets off this chain of reactions in your metabolism. So yeah, this is terrible.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. So what about reading the encyclopedia from A to Z? What's their takeaways that you still have with you to this day? Obviously, here's a basic question. How much do you retain from any book that you read? What percentage of, let's say you read a random book.
Right.
What percentage do you retain from that book? Because this is related to how much you retain from each issue of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Well, I think it hugely depends. I was reading one great writer named James Altucher.
Oh, I wonder, I don't even remember. See, I don't even retain my own writing. I wonder what you could have been reading. I have no idea I wrote about this before.
Well, it's the idea that if you read something, then often it just goes in one eye and out the other. Is that a phrase? But if you talk about it with people, bring it up, write it down, think about it, talk about it again over and over, that's the way to retain it. So, yeah, I would say I've forgotten about your average 99.3% of the encyclopedia. But there are... that it's a big book, so that's still thousands of facts.
A big 26 books.
Yeah, 33.
Well, actually, how many?
33.
33, so some letters were more than one book?
Yes, exactly.
Like what?
Well, your Q's, your Z's, and then S was a monster. It was like the Heartbreak Hill in the Boston Marathon. It was like 3 volumes.
Oh my gosh. All right, so what's your take? Given that you've forgotten 99.3% of it, what are your takeaways from reading A to Z, the Encyclopedia Britannica? That have helped your life.
Well, that have helped my life.
Filter.
Yeah. Yes, because there are plenty that don't, like, for instance, when I was reading it, I was gaining so much information, I felt I couldn't contain it. So I would insert random facts into every conversation. My wife would say, "Oh, I have a headache." And I would say, "Did you know that the Bayer Aspirin Company invented heroin in 1898, which is true. They patented heroin. They thought it was it is a cough suppressant. But it's got some
I did not know
side
that.
effects." Yeah. So then she would find...
Is that why they put Tylenol with, like, codeine in painkillers and stuff?
That's a good question.
Is it related?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Anyway, go on. Well, what you learned that helped your life?
Well, yeah. So she would penalize me $1 for every irrelevant fact. So
how'd she stay married to you, honestly? Like, you're like... everything was kind of against her. All your experiments.
She gets some positive. She gets a lot of emails saying, "Oh, we love your wife." And
by the way, I met Julie as well. She's the most wonderful woman in the world. It's really impressive that you're married to her.
Thank you.
But she's put up with a lot. But okay,
right.
What have you learned that's impressive?
All right. Well, one that has helped my life is what we were talking about before, is just how the good old days were not good. They were old and they were days, but they were not good. And you just read about the history of life in the 19th century, and you are blown away by how lucky we are to have 3, you know what it is? 3 words. I have a mantra now when I get annoyed. If the internet goes out on Amtrak, I say 3 words to myself: surgery without anesthesia. And that just snaps me back, and I realize, oh my God, the fact that people had to undergo that. People would commit suicide rather than have surgery without anesthesia.
I think the leading cause of suicide, I read this, I don't know if it's true. I read, and you could tell me if it's true, the leading cause of suicide in the 1800s was dental pain.
That's interesting. I don't know.
It's probably related to the fact that people A, couldn't do anything about the pain because there were no painkillers, and B,
Right.
they were probably afraid to have any kind of surgery on it. Like, could you imagine like getting a cavity out without
Oh,
anesthetic
yeah,
or a root
exactly.
canal?
They would just
Ugh.
tie a string to it, and then they would run in the opposite direction. That was literally how they did it. It was horrible. I don't know if that's true, but I like it. I like that fact.
Use it in a mental floss article.
Yeah, if you want, I mean, I would recommend. There is this woman who wrote an account of having surgery without anesthesia, and it's obviously the hardest 2 pages I've ever read. But
Who's the woman? You know,
I can't remember her name, but I'll send
send me
you
an
a
email
link.
and we'll put it in the show notes.
All right.
Yeah.
Because that will make you so grateful for what we have, and for drugs and anesthetics, and So that was
so
one.
Encyclopedia A to Z. That's the number one thing.
That is one of. I think another one was that everything is connected. I just love the idea, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but for the entire world.
Like,
And-
what's an example? What do you mean?
Well, it can be anything from, I was reading about Italy, the history of Italy, and the unifier was this guy Garibaldi, but it just mentioned in there that Abraham Lincoln reached out to Garibaldi he wanted him to be the leader of the Union troops in the Civil War because he was such a good general, and and Garibaldi said, "I will do it if you free the slaves." See, he was very liberal. And Lincoln was not ready to do that yet. So Garibaldi turned it down. But I just love this unexpected connection between you're reading
Yeah,
about
it's interesting.
Italy, and all of a sudden the Abraham Lincoln pops up. And that happened hundreds of times. And, I would be reading about, just to continue with the Lincoln theme, I'd be reading about patents. And there's a patent on how to lower a boat into the water, and it was by Abraham Lincoln. He was the only president to hold a patent.
Wow, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, see, it's all connected.
So do you think that's kind of been a unifying theme of all of your experiments? Like, just think about this world's largest family reunion. You're showing all people are connected.
That's it. And that's exactly the big takeaway. Right, we're all
And the drop dead healthy. I mean, you kind of looked across all health studies and tried to figure out which ones were real and which ones not. And they all kind of have the same value in some sense, just like a review of a movie, and you have to sort of pick and choose. I don't know, maybe I'm making a stretch on this one. I don't know.
I think for the health one, you can say it's all connected because the whole idea of mind being separate from body, that's a pretty flawed way to look at the world. And, stress really is, if you're looking at what makes you healthy, it's not just diet and exercise, it's also stress. So
How did you, for your book Drop Dead Healthy, how did you reduce stress to become healthier?
well, there's some good ways. There's so much data on meditation and how good that is. I am a terrible meditator. I'm just bad at it. And I should be better. There's some interesting data on human touch, that touching other human beings reduces stress. Even this one study said that if you hold your spouse's hand, that really reduces it. But even if you hold a stranger's hand, then it lowers your stress level. To me, that it would probably go the opposite. I would find it very stressful to
Hold your mate's hand.
that I can do. But going up to a stranger on the sidewalk and trying to clasp hands, I think might be counterproductive.
What about the whole idea of experimentation? Like, that in itself, it's like your life is an experiment on doing experiments. Like, what is it like for somebody to basically be constantly doing experiments? Like, how has your mind and life and relationships changed? Because it's almost like how a photographer is always looking around to see what photograph he or she could take. You're always looking around to see what experiment you can do. And so how does it kind of change your outlook on life just to realize that, basically everything we do, all our activity is the result essentially of experimentation in some way?
Well, that's it. I mean, I think it's made my life a lot better because it's opened me up to the idea that a lot of what we do is rote, and we take things for granted, and we do it in a certain way that we're told, but we don't have to. And that's why I encourage people to do little experiments. They could be small. They could be like take a different route to work, or you try out 5 different toothpastes over the next 5 months instead of using the same one. Because I realized, the way I chose a toothpaste is I was using Colgate because some kid in my camp when I was in 6th grade used Colgate and he seemed cool. And so I bought Colgate, and
That's why I was always a Crest person.
Yeah, you had
Same
a cool
reason. Yeah.
a cool Crest
All the
friend.
cool kids into Crest, yeah.
We had different cool friends, obviously.
What's another experiment someone could do?
Well, you can.
I like the idea of doing experiments maybe a little more sophisticated than these that you could kind of like document and track, and the results will be worthwhile to you.
Right. Well, I am big into the whole quantification, so just keeping track of every little of when you go to sleep and how many hours you get. Also, the simplest one for that is the pedometer. Just trying to get to 10,000 steps a day. That has changed my life in such a good way because it changes the way I think about movement. So now when I'm walking around the apartment looking for my wallet, I don't get annoyed because I'm like, you know what? I'm racking up the steps.
Well, is there health benefits? Is it true 10,000 steps is better than, let's say, 1,000 steps?
Well, yes. I mean, 10,000 steps is not science. It could be 9,000, could be 8,000, 12,000.
But just is that direction?
Yes. The
of
more
thinking?
walking, there's so much research on how walking and moving will make you live longer and healthier.
Really?
Yeah. So
how many steps do most people take on average, like the average American, per day?
It's a great question. I know that when I don't make an effort, I get like 3,000 or 4,000 a day.
And so how many have you done today so far?
Oh, today
Let's
has
look at your
been
pedometer.
terrible. Today has been terrible.
Did you walk here from the Upper West Side? You should have walked it, and you would have gotten like 10,000 steps.
Listen, I am going to make it by the end of the
It's
day.
only about 4 or 5 miles.
Yeah, let me see. Today is
How many steps in a mile if you walk a mile?
That's a good question. I know that it's about 10,000 miles is about 4 to 5. 10,000 steps is about 4 to 5 miles. Hold on, I'm looking it up. But I'm going to be embarrassed because this was a terrible day so far. But it's far.
It's only noon. It's morning for you still.
Yeah, it's about 2,000 steps.
Whoa, only 2,000 steps?
Yeah.
And half the day is gone.
Oh.
It's failure.
But yeah, and you know what else is I love experimenting, keeps your mind flexible. And this was one of the big lessons I got from another that writer I mentioned before, James Altucher, is I love, one of your ideas is taking 15 minutes a day and just generating ideas.
Yeah.
And that helps keep your mind flexible. And I love that. Do you still do that?
I do it every day. I've been doing it every day for probably 14 years now.
Wow. So did you do it today?
I did it today.
Wow. And what is your technique?
I sit down, I come up with some concept I want to generate ideas on. And today I generated how I wanted to think of 10 ways writing has benefited my life. And so that was my ideas.
That's amazing.
Because basically ideas to kind of keep myself inspired to keep writing.
Right. Do you ever do ones that are not directed at something so specific and just say, I'm going to see where my mind takes me?
No, it's specific because, but maybe I should try that.
I don't know.
Not a bad thing to experiment with.
Well, one is that I do is it's much less related to pragmatic things, but it's interesting. Like I'll take a concept like snowman and I'll be like, how can we reinvent the snowman? Like, how can
That's interesting.
we disrupt it? So, then you think of like snow person, snow transgender, snow animal, and then what if you switch the other side? It's not snow, it's rain, it's slush, it's sand. So, and that doesn't necessarily lead to something. Maybe it'll lead
doesn't have to lead to something practical. I think that's good too. That exercises the mind. The whole idea of it is not to come up with. A lot of people think the idea is I'm going to come up with a business idea to make money. Really, the idea is just exercise.
Right.
Just exercise the brain.
Well, that's what you told me, and I love the analogy. It's like a muscle, like every other muscle. And if you do this, like you said, you break down, your car breaks down on the street, and you'll be able to come up with solutions more easily.
It's really true. Like, this happened once. My car broke down. I don't even drive. I don't even have a license. My car broke down. We were stuck. And you just start coming up with ideas nonstop of like how you can get out of the situation. Anything from like hitchhiking to, other ways to fix the car to, whatever. I don't know.
Right.
We got out of that situation, basically. I was with my kids and we got out.
I love it.
But so what experiments, like, when do you come up with a list of experiments you want to do?
I do have a long list of things I want to do, and
Like,
I'm
what are
never
some
going to.
experiments? Has an experiment ever totally failed on you? Like it really made your life worse to do this experiment?
That's a good question. Well, I have started many experiments and just abandoned them because they were going nowhere. I did one where I tried to, it was based on reading nonverbal language, which I think is very important. But it takes too long. It takes years to become an expert in that, and there's so many quacks.
Like,
in there.
So do you believe? So I was just reading about something called micro expressions,
Right.
And do you think that's I've heard differing accounts whether that's true or not. The idea that people do 15 different micro expressions in a second, and because lying takes some more energy than telling the truth. If someone who's really good at reading those micro expressions, which the average person can't see because they're so
Right.
fast, if someone's really good at reading them, you could detect if someone's lying. Do you think that's true?
It is. I have thought about this a lot because I actually interviewed the guy who came up with that, Paul. What's his name?
I don't know.
And he's a delightful man, a great storyteller. They based a TV show on his life called Lie to Me. But I have not seen a lot of other scientists who have backed up this contention. So I think the jury's still out. And that was one of the main things I was going to explore in that.
How are you going to
story.
explore that? Like, just study with somebody or look at like thousands of videos and see if you
Right,
can
and
learn?
I did. I started to. They're on the internet. You can look at videos where you can try to judge people's micro expressions. And the idea is leakage. They talk about leakage. Like, you cannot, if you're really angry, you can try to control your face, but the angry face will leak out. They had one, a shot of Clinton when he was talking about Monica Lewinsky, and he was trying to remain calm. But then you could pause, and his lip just curls up in this look of disgust when he mentions her. But yeah, I'm not 100% sold on micro expressions, but it's great stuff. It's interesting, and also I love the whole.
So you tried it and you never felt you were able to get like some competency in it?
Yeah,
Because
it
I've
would have
also read
taken
that
years.
people who are experts at it feel like it's not a teachable skill.
That's interesting. I generally think most things are teachable. I am, some things not. There are people who are super tasters who have different taste buds
Yeah.
than us. But I think, like, even humor, a lot of people say, oh, you have to be born with a sense of humor. I'm not so sure that's true. I think you can train yourself to think in a humorous way if you listen to enough
Yeah, I
funny
totally agree with
albums.
that.
Yeah.
So what's an experiment that you're thinking, or what's an experiment that failed? Keep going with that one.
All right, so another experiment that failed.
And have you learned anything from the experiments that failed?
That's interesting. Well, this one never got off the ground, but this was a long time ago. I think it's probably been done now, but it was to try to communicate only through digital media. So the idea was I would
I love it.
shut myself in my room and only text with my kids and only Skype with my wife. And we had my niece's bat mitzvah was that year, and she's like, you are not going to, my idea was to show up on a monitor, like there would be a monitor at the table, and I would Skype in, and my wife was like, that's not happening.
Why didn't you just do it for a week or a month? Or do you feel like you needed to do it for a year in order to have material for a book or an article?
Yeah, I could have. She wouldn't even go for a week or a month. And I think one of the things is balancing your kids' mental health with the experiment.
But do you think your kids, though, benefit from the fact that they could see their dad everything's open, like you're willing to experiment on anything? And don't you think that would help them in general in later life?
I hope so. I mean, that is the hope, that anything, any annoyances they suffer will be outweighed And they have in fascinating parts of the experiments, like I did one called Radical Honesty, which was this movement. Have you heard of that one?
Oh, yeah. Was it Blanton?
Yeah,
Brad
exactly.
Blanton or something?
Did you have him on the show? I think I
No,
feel
no,
like you did.
no. I never did.
He's
I'm not a big
character.
believer in radical. I'm a believer in authenticity. Like if you're going to talk about something, be honest. But I'm not a big believer that just everything that pops in your head you should say.
Right. And that was one of my conclusions as well. I would say I believe in radical positive honesty, radically, so sort of sustainable
that.
radical honesty. Because,
Sustainable. I like that.
but yeah, like some of them, saying we ran into my wife's college friends at a restaurant and we were chatting and they were like, oh, we should all get together. And I had to say, I was doing this experiment. I had to say what was on my mind, which was, you guys seem nice, but I just have no desire to ever see you again.
And how did they react to that?
As you might expect, they were not overjoyed.
What did they say, like specifically?
It was a look of shock. It was more a look of shock. And then they were like...
Was Julie embarrassed?
So embarrassed. I mean, we had to part ways soon after that.
Did she yell at you?
Yes, absolutely yelled at me. In one sense, it was effective because we never have seen them again. So it did save time. But I don't recommend that as a way of life. I just think it's too hurtful. But there are times that when I was doing radical honesty, I would think back to this guy who was my editor at my first job at a tiny newspaper, and I'd be like, you know what? He was a really good guy. I should call him and tell him that, which is an awkward conversation, especially for men, to just call him out of the blue and say, I just was thinking of you and how much you meant to me and, helping me when I wasn't really good at this and teaching me. And he was, weirded out a little bit, I'm sure, but also it was a good conversation. I think both of us failed.
I like this idea. I'm going to try this. This is an experiment worth trying. Radical positive honesty. I'm going to try it.
Give it a shot. You're very handsome.
Now you're doing lying. That's radical lying. So what's another experiment I should do?
Well, let's see.
You know what I've been doing lately?
What?
I've been trying to take one good photograph a day. And one photograph that I think is good a day. Now, that doesn't mean it's good. It's just that I think it's good.
Right.
And it's very hard to try to do one quality thing. Pick any topic. It's hard to do one quality X a day.
And what do you find goes into a good picture? Like if you had to give a tip to...
Well, I think everybody... I don't know. I'm not a professional photographer at all. And I've only been doing this for a short amount of time. But I think if the picture tells a story, so you could take a picture of a thing or you could take a picture of a story. So someone could look at the photo and see, oh, that's a photo of a computer, whatever. Or someone could look at a photo, oh, that's a photo of someone who's sad and this is happening in their life probably. And, so somebody can almost imagine a story around that photo. I think those are better than photos of just things, like static things.
I like that.
And so in order to get a photo of a story, often you have to kind of go right up to the person and tell them why you want to take a photo of them and then take the photo. And that kind of like keeps the story alive. So there's some connection you have to keep on going while you take the photo.
So you would go up and say, you look sad. Can I?
Yeah, I have never, so far in the short amount of time I've been doing this, I have not taken a photo where I haven't made some sort of connection with the subject in advance.
Interesting. I like that. One experiment I've been doing, which I love, is that I talk to myself. I'm a huge believer in talking to myself. And I find I am a much happier person when I'm talking to myself.
What do you mean? Like, what do you say?
Well, it could be if I'm not thinking of anything, I could just be narrating my life. Now I'm getting on the subway, now I'm taking out my Metro card.
Really?
Yeah, I love it.
And what benefits are there to that?
Well, there's the benefit of mindfulness. You realize if you're walking through the park now, I'm looking at these amazing trees. Can you believe this? That there are these trees in full bloom and helping.
So as opposed to if you're not talking to yourself, you might just be stuck in your daydreams or anxieties or whatever.
For me, my brain goes right to the anxieties if I don't monitor it.
Wow. So talking to yourself almost anchors you in the moment. This is it's like this narration of your life anchors you to where you are right now.
That's one advantage. Another advantage is if you say your fears out loud, they sound, it gives you a little perspective, and they sound crazy, and you realize, you know what, this is a bad way to think. I'm not going to be, just because I didn't get this one deal or this article doesn't mean I'm going to be homeless. No offense to you. I know you're
I'm homeless.
You're homeless. But another thing was I also...
Which is my experiment, by the way. I'm doing a year of homelessness as an experiment.
Which is one of the great all-time experiments. I love that.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I could get a place if I want. I'm not prevented from getting a place, but I'm not homeless in that sense. But
and what are your initial takeaways? Are you liking it?
Yes. My takeaways is that financial transactions of any sort are stressful, so I'd rather not do it. And that if you spend, like I have, 20 years of helping people and doing goodwill in general, you'll find that there's this pent-up demand of people who want to help you. And so I've been benefiting from that. And I basically now spend very little money, and I have nice places to live, and so far so good. But it's, again, if once the experiment, I'm not as formal with experimenting as you are. You do I'm going to do a year of this. We'll see how long I can handle doing this.
And how long has it been? A couple of months, right?
Yeah, a couple of months.
I love that. That
Almost
is
2 months.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a little harder for me to pull off with the. But yeah, and one other plug for talking to yourself is there is some science behind it, because language uses the frontal cortex. And so if you are getting really emotional, frightened, or panicked, or anxiety filled, just talking, just using language calms you down.
Is that really true? What? I don't understand. What's the aspect of the frontal cortex?
Well, the frontal cortex, there's the limbic system, the lizard brain, this very emotional part of our brain, which came first evolutionarily. And then there's the frontal cortex, which we developed later, and that has the language. And so that's the regulation part, and it can regulate your emotions. So just by talking, even if you're feeling really angry and just saying, I'm feeling really angry because of this, this, and this, that helps calm you down. So
Wow.
I am a fan of verbalization.
So okay, that's a great one. What's another experiment I can do? I want more experiments.
All right. Let me think. Hold on a sec. I would say, well, I've read a lot about people who don't take showers and do the...
I've done that experiment.
Yeah. I have not done that.
Well, moving along. You know what's an experiment I like to do is I like to once a day talk to a stranger. So I think that gets me more and more comfortable with just kind of connecting with people. And it's very hard for me. I'm very shy in general. I started off very shy, and it makes me less and less shy.
That I love. Can you give me an example of one you did recently?
Yeah, yesterday, well, it's related to this photograph thing now, but yesterday I saw a couple that looked very much in love, and I'm always curious about that. Like, how did they meet? What did they do to keep staying in love? And they were total strangers. They were sitting on a bench talking. I had walked around this park a few times, and I saw them, and I just went up to them and I said, "Hey, you guys look like you're very much in love. Can you tell me how you met and what's going on in your lives?" And it turns out they had been in love. They had been boyfriend, girlfriend, but now they've been broken up for several years, but they're just friends, which is fine. It was
nice.
interesting
That's
to know.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I learned something. I talked to them for a while and learned something.
And they probably feel good. People like to tell their stories, so it was good for them and good
I think
for you.
we're all in the same tribe, as you pointed out. With we're all related. So,
right.
And it's like you said earlier, touching somebody makes triggers positive emotions and less stress and so on. And I think maybe even talking as a way of connection reduces stress.
It reminds me of the scene in Annie Hall. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Where Woody Allen is trying to figure out love, and he goes up to strangers and says, "You look like you're in love." And one of them, he says, "What is your secret?" And the woman says, "We use a large vibrating egg." So,
one person told me, because I asked this question a lot. One person told me they went to, when they were in love, before they were married, I mean, that kind of exciting stage of love.
Yeah.
They went to a therapist then to say, "See us now when we're at our best." And, this way when we have problems later, what our baseline happiness should be, should get
That's
us back to.
fantastic.
And so they've been going once a quarter, and they're married 25 years.
And how is their happiness? Have they?
They're great because they're together 25 years.
That's great. I love that. Well, one experiment I did once was where I tried to cater to all the whims of my wife because people like you had mentioned how patient she is. So it was sort of a month of trying to be the best husband ever. And one
Did she take advantage of that though? Because she knew you were trying to do that.
She was drunk with power. It was horrible. It was absolute, like, even something like watching TV, and she would say, "Can you change the channel? Turn on CBS or whatever." And I take the remote, and she's like, "No, I want you to get up and change it on the TV itself, just because." But one thing I did for that was every day I would buy her a little present. And it was actually, we talked a little about this, how behavior affects your thoughts. So the whole idea of cognitive behavioral psychology, if you act in a certain way, then you will start to feel that way. Your brain will catch up. There's a great quote that it's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting. That was by the founder of Habitat for Humanity said that, and I love it. And that's what I did. When I bought a little present for my wife, it was like I was reminding myself how much I loved her, or convincing myself how much I loved her, and it worked. It was.
You loved her more after how many days in a row did you do that?
I think I did it for a good month, and I should probably do it again.
Should probably keep doing it forever, right?
Yeah, why not? Because, you give it to her and you're like, oh, I must love her so much. I'm giving her a present.
Now, does
She's
it make
happy,
her love you back more?
I mean, how can it not? It's like, even if she knows that it's rote, it's still, how can you not love getting a little gift? And it's tiny. It's a tiny gift. So maybe that's an experiment,
Yeah, so to find somebody and to give a gift every day.
Just a stranger.
You could totally use this in a lot of ways. Oh, yeah, maybe giving a gift to a stranger every day is such a great idea.
Well, yeah,
That's a good experiment.
That is.
What would be the gift? What would be a good kind of innocuous stranger gift you can give, like a box of chocolates?
Yeah. I mean, it isn't with strangers that it's definitely a risk that you're going to get a restraining order.
But you can just go up to them and say, listen, I'm trying an experiment.
Yes.
Where you just be honest. I'm trying an experiment where I'm giving a gift to a stranger every day. I'm picking you for no real reason. Or you have to come up with a systematic way of picking someone, or else you could just sort of find a pretty person of the opposite sex every day. But maybe like you flip a coin on each person.
I like that.
So the first person who comes up heads, you give a gift to.
Right.
And you explain the situation, you give a gift, and if they don't take it, they don't take it. But
right. But if they do, then I think you both feel better. And I love the idea of being very upfront about I'm doing an experiment, because when I did that radical honesty, that was when it did work. A lot of the times it was because I said I'm doing this experiment on radical honesty where I just say what I feel. And I've had people who tell me that they read the article and they use it as a pickup method, which I can't necessarily endorse, but they say they go up to a woman and say, I'm doing something called radical honesty where I say whatever I want. I find you very attractive. I would like to.
I don't find that's a pickup method as much as a way of psyching yourself up to not be shy in front of someone you're attracted to.
Yeah.
It gives you an excuse to not be shy as opposed to something that's going to compel them to listen to you.
Yeah. I think it is all in the delivery. Like if you say, as Brad Blanton did many times, I find you attractive and want to sleep with you right now.
That won't work.
Well, it will. According to him, it works 2% of the time. So if you're willing to get 98 rejections and slaps in the face, then this might be an effective way for you to beat people.
I think in general, the idea of experimenting must also make you comfortable with rejection, because even take like the art of living biblically, you're going to be doing stuff that's going to make you feel weird a lot of the time, like wearing a robe or growing a kind of weird beard or stoning someone in Central Park like you did in the book. You're going to have to get comfortable through all of these experiments doing things that are outside the norm. And I think that's kind of the overall benefit of this experimentation, is that it kind of makes you blaze your own path in life, which is
I
always a
love
pleasure.
That point. I love that point. Yeah, because rejection is a huge part of
Experimenting. The whole idea of an experiment is you're doing something that other people aren't doing.
And that might fail.
Or it might make you look weird.
Right. And I think getting used to rejection is a wonderful thing, because if you don't, it's such a part of life, and it's still such a part of my life as a writer. I get rejected all the time, and being okay with that and sort of shrugging it off is such a hugely useful skill.
Well, AJ, I also want to promote your upcoming soon. When's your podcast starting? You're doing a whole podcast on genealogy and the family reunion idea. When's that podcast starting?
That will be out in October or November, somewhere
so
around
long
there.
From now?
Well, it's these. They're very into production. I'm working with the wonderful folks at the Gimlet Media. So,
and Alex Blumberg has been a guest on this podcast.
Yes, and he's a genius. So, but the idea is, we want to make it little gems, little masterpieces. So they are taking their time.
And can you eventually find out how you and I are directly related? We know from the DNA test that we're third cousins, but I really want to find out how we're directly related. I feel like my family tree is not connected to anybody.
Oh, yeah,
it's getting depressing for me.
That will be my mission for this week, is to find our common ancestor.
It must be there somewhere.
Moishe Liebenbaum or whoever it is.
Something like that. Some Jewy name like that. All right, is there anything else you want me to promote? You do your Esquire, your mental floss, your books. Everything's great that you do. You're like the modern Mark Twain. I honestly think you're like the modern Mark Twain. I'm saying that in all. I'm using radical positive honesty here. So,
I think you are the modern Mark Twain. So I love everything you do, and you are far more prolific than I am. So
I don't know about that, but how about we argue about it over lunch? You want to grab lunch after this? All right,
absolutely.
Good. Thanks for coming on, AJ, and let's grab lunch.
Thanks, James.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Hey, thanks for listening. Listen, I have a big favor to ask you, and it will only take 30 seconds or less, and it would mean a huge amount to me. If you like this podcast, please let me know. Please let the team I work with know. Please let my guests know. And you can do this easily by subscribing to the podcast. It's probably the biggest favor you could do for me right now, and it's really simple. Just go to iTunes, search for The James Altucher Show, and click subscribe. Again, it will only take you 30 seconds or less, and if you subscribe now, it will really help me out a lot. Thanks again.
I created this idea called Generation W. It's all about educating, inspiring, connecting women. And it's about building community at the same time. It's not like women are on some outpost somewhere, right? Just like ethnic people are on some outpost there, people of color, right? We're all together. So if we learn how to appreciate each other, we elevate one, we elevate us all. And so for the first year, that's where we started. And we had 700 people show up. They had no idea what they were showing up to, but they loved it. And they said, we want more.